what goes into the mind of the stakeholders in the industry, in the minds of an investor. How the scheme of investment happens from the perception of a buyer or an investor.
One classic pitfall that buyers do is they do not know whether they are buying something for living or for investing. All of this kind of comes with its own type of ticket sizes.
Huge amount of real estate players or sellers or developers are still not yet figured out what we are trying to call it as the trustworthiness building up.
Any business for that matter should follow when it comes to indexing themselves on the search engine, being present on social media, especially if it is a B2C, where they target the customers, where they retarget the customers, how they do it, what are all the data points that they should capture.
Overall, the industry is suffering from, plus especially the smaller builders struggle more because how to invest, what kind of technology, what kind of digital marketing tools do I have.
All right, good morning and welcome to the third episode of Realiti.Club podcast. I'm Balaji, the marketing specialist from various industries, and for today, I'm going to be the marketing specialist from the prop tech space. And joining me is an investor and product leader from Chicago, Badri Parthasarathy, and Arun C.R, the founder of Realiti.Club. So we did discuss about the money spin that happens in the real estate industry in the first episode and what goes into the mind of the investors, the property developers, when they choose a certain location and attempts to build that area and eventually the economy. And today we're going to start with what goes into the mind of the stakeholders in the industry and, of course, in the minds of an investor when they choose to decide to buy a certain property in a certain space when there are options of plenty. Now, I'm going to bring in the sales and marketing angle today, wherein I'm going to talk about the insiders around how the real estate industry works into convincing, or to use a ruthless word, luring a buyer or an investor into getting the money into a certain project or a property. So, to begin with, I have a straightforward question to the investor right here, Badri. There are a lot of properties that come up in a certain area. We did talk about Hiranandani in OMR and about quite a few properties, including we touched upon how Arun XL evolved in the Oregon area. There has been a spike in terms of the per square feet rate in OMR ever since that project was rolled out, while it has been a gradual rise in Oregon. There are a lot of aspects to it. Now, let's bring in the sales and marketing angle. What gets into your mind when you see an advertisement? What gets into your mind when you get to know about a certain project? And how the scheme of investment happens from the perception of a buyer, or in this case, an investor, is something that I'd like to ask.
Sure. Thanks, Balaji. I think even as a buyer, even the last episode, the case example that we discussed, I had extensive conversation with that buyer as well, and I can quote based on my experiences and that buyer's search and all of that. So I think even within buyers, I see a lot of nuances. I have seen a few cycles, thanks to my parents who typically had the practice of buying a few plots and all through our childhood, and then we kind of selling them later. I think even as a buyer itself, you go through certain cycles, right? So one classic pitfall that buyers do is they do not know whether they are buying something for living or for investing. They muddle this argument up a lot. I think Arun would have seen thousands and thousands of example of this in his long career. Like, hey, I want to buy a home for investment, and that is like the first place where the mistake starts. Right? Do you want to buy it for living, or do you the emotion aspect of it is very different from the speculation aspect of it, right? But typically, textbook number one, ticket size. What is the ticket size that I am able to afford? Which drastically differs when you're buying a plot. Typically, when you're buying a plot or a home, right? You might want to build a home, you want to buy a plot for speculation, you might want to buy an apartment. All of this kind of comes with its own type of ticket sizes. So what ticket size I can afford, and kind of closely related to that, what kind of area and what kind of property that I'm buying. And of course reputation comes, right? Especially if it is a living one. For many people, like brands, reputation, the brand ambassadors, the length of the brand, the longevity of the brand, their perception, all of that matters. Obviously that will have a trade-off with cost, right? Typically if the brand is good, they will load that little bit of premium. But yeah, these are. And then ROI possibility, as Arun beautifully discussed in the last couple of episodes, right? If I'm putting it for speculation based on the area and the entry ticket size, what I think are my ROI. So these are some of the consideration. I would say a nuanced buyer would make that clear distinction between speculation and living, whereas some newbies kind of muddle that up a little bit. So the considerations are a little different. These are my 2 cents, as I would say a little better than a total newbie to property investment. I'm not nowhere as sophisticated as Arun, but I've also seen a little bit of cycles as a retail investor. So
Perfect. I get you completely on this perception. Now, I'd like to, put myself in the shoes of the, people in the industry where, let's talk about how Hiranandani evolved in 2004. You had nothing in Padur, you had nothing in Siruseri, and all you had was one IT park, and, things were shaping up.
uh, for the sake of audience, Hiranandani, when we say they got evolved in 2004 and all those things, unfortunately, the entire panel is skewed to Chennai and right as a Tamil Nadu. So the last three episodes also, I would say that predominantly when we start, we have been at least in our phrases we use that Hirko started in 2000, 2004 and things like that. That's predominantly to do with Chennai. I'm just trying to clarify here for the
Bombay and Bangalore examples as well. For example, my in-laws are relatively close to the Palava in Dombivli, which again is a fascinating case study of Lodha. I mean, it's
I still feel that we should not restrict taking examples of just Chennai or Tamil Nadu. But that's going to be very skewed. And our audience should not, I mean, real estate is not just about a particular city or particular things, right? See, we are trying in this podcast, we are trying to basically discuss dynamics by picking certain cases. That's all. So these cases could basically form a template and that could be applied across any geography, irrespective of whichever city in India it could be. At least in India, I would say most of the points what we discuss can form template globally, but few might get restricted to India purely from the dynamics of demand supply and government regulations.
typically like a retail mall has anchor stores, right? Typically any new area has like a anchor developer, right, who guarantees your footfall over a 10-20 year period. And then the tier 2 tier 3 brands come in. That's the whole same template, whether you take Hiranandani in Powai, you take I don't know, Purvankara in Sarjapura Road, you take Palava, Lodha, everywhere. That's the same concept. A big developer gets a huge land parcel with a 10-20 year view in a greenfield area, and then kind of townships develop around that, right? Same old.
So quickly to do a course correction, I'd like to bring in quite a few cities, and also we are a little biased towards Hiranandani because they haven't gave any ambassadorship to us, and yet we are talking a lot about them. Now let's talk about DLF in the Noidas and the Lodha Group, which does Palava near Nilji in Navi Mumbai, and you have Sarjapura, which gets which got picked up by the Purvas, and now the Prestige Group has taken forward. So if you notice something, they find a large parcel of land, and there is literally nothing. What they do, from the sales and marketing angle, before you tend to sell a property, before you tend to get to the marketing activities, what you have to do is you have to create a demand. So demand generation becomes step zero, or I would rather say step -5, -5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then the step zero is actually to go to the market. So the step -5 involves identifying the scope of growth at a certain area and finding everybody else around the industry, the stakeholders especially. Number one, the first person to get convinced is the developer. The second person to get convinced are the people who will actually go to the field and get the marketing activities initiated. In this case, the channel partners or the agents who will eventually become partners. And number three, the regulatory aspects that comes into place. How feasible it is as a project that can come up in a certain area and so on. What are the key parameters that comes into mind from the sales angle, Arun, that you will even identify the scope of generating a demand in a certain area? I'm talking one step before the sales and marketing side of things, so I would want you to come from that perspective.
See, let's let's assume like this, right? See, buyers tend to look for, I mean, look for trustworthiness in terms of before from the seller, right? That's the core piece of it. Okay. So how will a seller be able to build this trustworthiness is the point or the basic sanity check which all of the marketing or any project per se, before even thinking of printing a brochure or whatever it is, would think of, which is like, what will happen when my buyer tend to see my ad, right? What will happen? Will he pick up phone and dial? While dialing, is it going to be a fancy number, right? Can he remember that? Can the same number be maintained everywhere in every other medium so that he'll be able to recall and call me back, right? Thanks to the invent of Google and of late, last one decade, all of us are able to really not worry about remembering the numbers, right? Even there, at least if we could maintain one number as a seller, Google will print the same number, however you're going to search us as, right? So so the basically the digitalization is an extension of what we had done physically then. So that's all it is, right? So it starts from there, right? So how is the consumer going to see my ad? What is the perception he's going to get in the advertisement, right? And based on that perception, he's going to call. When that perception or expectation, whatever is set in his mind, can we go on to maintain it during the conversation of the telecall, the first telecall, right? Or the first interaction with our sales team, and then we invite them to him. We invite them to our physical site, right, for an interested prospect, and then while he travel through that distance from wherever he is, from whichever part of the corner of city he's going to come to that project, we have to ensure that we maintain that sanity. So, which means there has to be proper en route boards, there has to be proper, those sort of simple things which we work on to make sure that while he comes, he get to see us 2, 3, 4, 5 times more to get the trustworthiness, right? So then, while he comes in front of the site, how are we, our compound wall or our entry arch or our project site is well laid or presented to him, so that we have to showcase that we are ready to kickstart if it is a under construction or a to be started project. So whatever we have said it in the ad, can we maintain that in the physical site, right? That is very critical. These are pure perceptual expectation versus reality check, which we have to.
Because it is already the costliest consumer good, probably only less than some very hyper premium cars. Plus, you are selling literally thin air at that point of time, right? Most probably, you have a model unit and you are literally showing them thin air and pictures and land. So at least whatever you have in your control, you want it to be look very clean and organized and trustable. So
So I was about to go there to the model house, right? Badri, you tend to already think of the model house, but typically model house was a differentiation some time back, right? So 10 years back, at least in South India, a project which has a model house is better trusted than a project which didn't have a model house, right? Then before that, if you see, there were 3D models which was sculpted, like miniature. That was a practice. Then came the virtual walkthroughs and things like that, which probably said that we would be able to give a perspective. Yes, today we are talking about VR, ARs, and even the dome sort of an experience and things like that. So how can we really take our buyer closer to the reality in terms of his mind space, right? And that is predominantly going to gain the trust of the buyer in us as a seller. This is inevitable, right? Irrespective whether you're the number one builder in a city or you're just an entry level startup, right? So that is the physical aspect of difference, I would say. So if you typically see this, as any of you, right, you try to call up a small developer or tier 3 sort of a developer. When you dial a number, right, you don't normally get a response, or probably it goes for a complete no answer and then nobody responds, right? What happens, right? Similar ways, go to a tier 2 person where, hey, everything is brilliant. So I call, they pick up, they ask me to come. Then when I go and visit their office is like, okay, sort of a office. I'm saying, because builders are tend to be perceived as millionaires, right? So a millionaire's office, uh, I have to visualize, and a sales guy who comes out there is not properly dressed up, and his courtesy to my expectations is not met, right?
It is like not, it's like a not very fit, let's use very polite words. It's like a not very fit gym instructor, right? Like how would you trust a gym instructor is not very fit, right? So
I have a sharp question to you here, Arun. You spoke about how the scheme of things would be when it comes to a real estate office, where even me as a buyer, when I put myself in the shoes of a buyer, there are certain leads that go in. Being a marketer, I know how the leads get generated, and we send quite a few leads. And what they do is, there is no typical sales experience. I'm from the SaaS space, and I've even sold enterprise ERP solutions, and the way we sort of walk through the customer through a journey, the sales funnel over here is a lot more comprehensive in a way that you don't tend to lose a customer that easily, lose a prospect that easily. But the conversion rates are abysmally bad in real estate. Is it a part of the blame that should go to the sales team in office? Because I've seen them rely on the properties or the props inside the sales office more than understanding the needs of the customer. What goes into the mind of them, and how this should.
Balaji, as of real estate is concerned, primarily demand is not a problem, right? Vis-a-vis a SaaS play, right? A SaaS software may not have the similar sort of an inquiry list or a prospects compared to a house in India, right? House buying in India. So if you see, there'll be crazy amount of people with affordability who might probably call you. So generating leads were never a problem, right? So that's the at least the understanding of the industry, right? At least the, I
I'd
mean,
like to interrupt here. I'd like to repeat the question. We had to generate demand in the ERP space to actually sell. Despite this, the conversion rates are much better. While in the real estate space, we have enough demand and there are enough pointers to actually convince a customer, if you consider any project for that matter, because we did discuss about a certain standard template being followed by every developer.
basically it's high. See, primarily from see, we can talk several aspects, several dimensions to it, right? But I would like to restrict it to the buyer perspective today for this episode, right? So if we speak from the buyer perspective, as I said, the trustworthiness or his decision making, it's one or twice he's going to make those decisions. At least he's not going to buy frequently, and if he makes a wrong decision, right, he cannot probably, I mean, he can't do a trial here, right? Yeah, he can't probably buy and then live for 6 months and then say, okay, hey, I'm not interested in this property. No, that can't happen here. So that's where I'm saying this very, very different game altogether. And probably we have to learn a lot from how the SaaS incubation of funneling happens, right? How after gathering lakhs together of leads, still you will be able to keep nudging and making them relevant and be hooked to your brand is something which I mean, as an industry, we have to learn from the SaaS world. I'm not denying that, right? Having said that, we also have to. I'm going to give you that inside perspective, right? So this trustworthiness is something which is very, very important. See, today in India, we have at least 25,000 builders, right? Uh, Spread across various cities, at least recognized builders per se, are 25,000. Out of this, the so-called names what we could probably pop up and see in all of the Google 99 acres magic bricks and advertisements could not exceed 1,000 or 1,000, 2,000 at best, right? So which means there is a huge amount of real estate players or sellers or developers are still not yet figured out what we are trying to call it as the trustworthiness building up, right? People tend to think that just because they have the capacity or they have the mandate to sell a property which is as large as 5, 10, 15 acres or 5, 10, 50, 20, 50, 100 apartments, they feel that they are already privileged. Then that means that's where most of the, I would say, the bottom of the pyramid of builders tend to fail, and those projects don't go through great, right? So that's why I'm saying this is irrespective of whether you're an entrant, right, or the number one developer in India today. Making sure the sanity check for the trustworthiness what you have to establish is bare minimum, right? You have to go to a restaurant and you have to find the table clean, irrespective of whether you are sitting in a small hut sort of a restaurant or a fine dining or a seven-star hotel, right? So like that sort of a clean plate, right, a fresh plate or a fresh, so something like that is what I'm trying to talk about, right? So if there is an advertisement which a buyer see, and then if he is trying to reach out or call, he expects he does not express it in words to you whether he's dissatisfied, right, or he's, but what I'm saying is, if there are many instances buyer tend to after calling, without even trying to understand where the project is, what's the floor plan is, they tend to cancel the decision of moving forward with that builder, because the mere interaction in the telecall in the first instance, from the sake from the way it is presented itself, puts them off, right? The way they have been taken to the site, right, the way they have been showcased as a site visit process, these are some things which is going to literally put them off. And that's why if you see the smaller players, invariably every buyer would want to meet the MD, right? Right, every and MD is also typically those small developers, because they can't afford sales team, they tend to say that, hey, as long as you bring them to my office, right? So they sit in a cabin and they try to speak like a typical starting sales guy, right? So the MD does that work, right, for a one, in spite of he comes in a good nice SUV and he is worth the X cost and things like that, he tends to get down. See, we can appreciate his individual commitment, but that's not going to definitely build trust amongst the buyers, right? uh, those are things which we need to really care about. Sellers do not care about an office space being spick and span. I'm not speaking about the size of the office, but I am speaking about simple straightforward things, because today a telephone number is something which is of no cost. An office space with a couple of rooms is no problem for any builder, right? And having a sales guy who is dressed well and could probably speak in regional language, but with some sort of a knowledge, is inevitably expected, right? So then if some MD is coming and talking, then he speaks about the regulations and the when is he going to hand over, when is he going to start, all these things. So because this dissatisfaction happens at the lower tier, invariably most of the demand gets skewed to the top 1,000, the top tier of the builders, right? Amongst the top developers, how are they trying to differentiate? Is they take this sanity check, whatever I'm saying, as a bare minimum thing, right? Which means almost everybody does that, right? But there are occasions where there are only very few of those 1,000 do it 365 days, 24 by 7, that, right? Vis-a-vis, there are builders who do it during only the ad campaigns, right? So these are the second different things which buyers tend to clearly look at, right? Because today's social media is such that you will probably be judged from anywhere, I mean from any action of yours, right? People will judge you based on how, what Google is saying about you, right? If Google says you are closed on Sunday, they would perceive that you don't have an office open. But unfortunately, basically, that most of us don't update our business profile, right? So these are basic stuffs, and Google reviews are something which is going to determine certain aspects of how I am going to be perceived by my buyers. So these are today's reality check for most of us as a sellers, right? So all of our names are going to be picked up just like that. So whether you like it or not, how you interact with every lead is inevitably critical, right? So that's why I would say, at least in my whoever I am interacting, my clients, we tend to make sure that we don't generate leads which are irrelevant, right? And we don't accumulate certain people, because inevitably, because as you said, Balaji, conversion rates are very very minimal, which means 98% of the only 2% gets converted, meaning that 98% is going to say no to your project. At least a gracious no is something which I would want, so that in market my perception and trustworthiness is always at par, right? Vis-a-vis today, most of the
Basically, each of your lead, especially which gets comes in as a call or which gets converted to a site visit, each person is going to expect best behavior from you, the builder, 24 by 7 by 365. So you are going to have to put that same level of superb effort for everybody. So you rather ensure you do a best shot at bringing in the most qualified leads, so that you are putting all the effort for the most valuable leads.
See, as a marketer, I have always observed this. It's a textbook methodology that any business for that matter should follow when it comes to indexing themselves on the search engine, to being present on social media, especially if it is a B2C, where they target the customers, where they retarget the customers, how they do it, what are all the data points that they should capture. All these are pretty straightforward, so that the legitimacy of the leads are, brought to some absolute sanity, so that the sales team in office do not have to do the heavy lifting. That's the kind of activities that the marketing team in the back end, which even our teams do in office for several players from various industries. However, there is something that we need to start pondering about, is that the scheme of things, especially we did discuss about how the sales team function in office, and in certain developer projects, you have the managing director themselves portray themselves as sales executives. So
will tell you, if I don't get, I mean, buyers don't respect a property without a security. This is out of our research. We found out that buyer do not respect a property. I mean, do not get the trustworthiness of on a property if they don't see a security there, right? But and the courtesy of the security is something which determines how the brand is perceived, or how the further. This is something which is unbelievably different. I mean, at least I have seen a huge difference in terms of my site visit conversions, or the way with which they probably, I mean, there are so many people who have said no, but they have gone on to talk great about our salesperson's efforts and things like that, to a banker, right? Bank executive. Thereby, the bank executive, instead of prioritizing another developer, he would prioritize our project. in vouching to another buyer, right? These are absolutely we can't control, right? I mean, we can't plan it. So all what we could plan is those things which you can control, which is like your project, your process, your interactions, and making sure. And as I said, one thing which we all have to learn from the world of SaaS is the incubation of our database. I mean, we only convert for a month. If I mean, you will not believe this. We tend to we generate leads like crazy every month, right? For a project, all of us. When I say we, real estate as an industry, we tend to generate in probably for a quarter we anywhere go from 15 to 20,000 leads for a project, right? And the conversions are such, right? If we have to go past 100 sales per quarter for a project, then typically, as you said, the conversion has to. But we what we are not doing, similar to the SaaS play or right, is incubating the 98%, right? We know there are future prospects. We know that there are people out there who have inquired today, whom we have inquired are likely to probably sell some property and come back to us after 6, 8, 10 months. But those people, how are we actually building relationship with? How are we those are things which I think all of we in the industry have to invest heavily in terms of that side of things, where
Technically, we call it the nurture streams, basically, where we do the drip campaign.
Much as there is a superb human touch, that whole MD touch, as you said, to kind of how do you deal with the customer, but to funnel the most quality leads, or once they say no, to kind of keep them warm and nurture all of this, I think liberally technology is needed, and that's a luxury overall the industry is suffering from. Plus, especially the smaller builders struggle more, because how to invest, what to invest, what kind of technology, what kind of digital marketing tools do I have, so that I kind of improve the quality of leads. Also, whoever says no, I kind of keep them warm in mainstream. I think I would say that's a good point to kind of close circle around and summarize this thing, because we're kind of coming to a logical listing, so that because we kind of compiled and traversed very very organically, so that's why I'm calling that out.
sure, sure. Sounds
So again, now I'd like to come to another stream of things when it comes to the sales aspect of it, where I'm once again bringing the SaaS parallels over here. The sales teams right here in the developer office plays role of a support, while the marketing efforts in itself does the majority of the sales activity as such. If somebody comes in with a sales aspect, is something that we need to ponder and get into deliberations in a way that they actually try to understand from the shoes of the customer what they really want. However, there is another ecosystem who are called the agents or the channel partners who tend to do it. This is based on my observation. I'm not an insider as such. How well the developers perceive the adoption of channel partners into inducting into the sales stream. And of course, that requires a lot of several aspects, which we'll reserve it for the next podcast. But I'd like you to have a little touch upon that, and of course, we'll conclude with that.
Yeah. As you said, I think our next podcast had to have to focus on how the same trustworthiness is built with a broker office, right? I would probably touch upon that there. But just to lead there, I would say that today most of the brokers have started realizing and started working on their office and their call center, I mean the telecall numbers and things like that. And even with my one of the superhero interviews, what we have started, right, in club, probably you guys know, and our audience would know in the future, is that I was interacting with a person called Sarit in Hyderabad, right? He was trying to tell me that during the week, if any of the buyer says that, hey, he picks up the phone and says that I don't have time, I just want to come now and then have a look, are you available, and things like that, right? They normally don't tend to value that buyer. they tend to tell, I mean, they tend to value only buyers who pick up a particular day and time and they come over a weekend and things like that. I asked them why, and they were saying, he was saying that the because this is more a trust, a high value product, and nobody can take instant decision. So if a buyer is showing desperation, that means he's definitely not going to buy nor take a right decision, right? So if a buyer is not giving a half day time to even explore options, then it's not worthwhile spending our time with them. So these are intricacies from those sort of offices, sales offices, which we all have to learn also, right? And even buyers have to learn as to how properties must be bought. They so all these are points which probably will take it up in our subsequent podcast in that dimensions. uh, yeah, I'll leave it there, Balaji.
So basically, what goes inside a sales office and various stakeholders over there is something that I think we need to take it to the separate episode, and let's do the same in the subsequent one, wherein we'll talk about how these support streams work and how these stakeholders actually function, and what are all the key aspects or the journeys that would actually ensure a better customer experience eventually. Now, on that note, I'd like to conclude the today's episode, and we will look forward to have a lot more discussions about how to engage within the stakeholders, between the stakeholders and the buyers, and so on. Things are getting a lot more interesting, and I look forward to have a lot of great conversations in the upcoming episodes as well. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again in the next one tomorrow. Bye for now for all of us.